just because you're a great engineer, it does not mean you are going to be good at leading a team of engineers. There are different skills that are required at each level whenever it comes to career progression or even building businesses. And so when you step into that role, where you step into the manager role or director role, it is crucial that you start to understand what it means to lead people.
Hey, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I'm so excited today. We have an episode and we're going to talk about people. Yes, we're going to talk about people. We're going to talk about growing your people, growing your management team, making sure they're effective, right? Because you guys know you put the wrong person in to lead and suddenly you don't have the company that you want. But I'm excited today because we have Sean Barnes that's joining us. He is the founder and principal of WSS Solutions. And he's a seasoned cross-functional leader with more than 20 years of progressive expertise in the areas of leadership development, digital strategy, operational excellence, human resources, ESG, and HSE. He's successfully led and played integral roles in acquisitions and integrations of over 50 companies. And he's guided two in their IPO, their initial public offering in the oil service field. So please join me in welcoming Sean Barnes to our platform. Hey, Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy to be here and looking forward to diving into this topic.
Great. Well, this is a great topic because, I've seen it happen in big companies, Fortune 500 companies. I've seen it happen in small companies, right? We hire somebody because they have a skill set. They have proven to be excellent, whether they've grown up through our organization or we've hired them externally through a different organization. And suddenly we're wondering why they're just not succeeding, right? In this new role, why they aren't able to motivate their employees or their team and why their team hates them in some cases, right? And today I want to talk about that. But before I jump into that, Sean, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why this topic is so important to you?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you and I were talking about before we started recording, I spent the majority of my life as the introverted IT nerd, but was also intrinsically driven to accomplish big things in life. And because I was so passionate about the technology, I was able to accomplish a lot of good things and eventually found myself in a director and VP of IT role. And eventually in my mid 30s, got to a point where I realized that I wasn't fulfilled. I had hit that big six-figure salary. I got the VP title, all these things, but I wasn't fulfilled. And saw an opportunity to also start leading human resources. And that just completely opened my eyes to an entirely different world. And while extremely challenging, my passion and purpose is now helping people grow and scale their businesses and helping them become the best version of themselves. So I started my podcast and started WSS Solutions so that we can do just that, build leaders, build people, build teams and companies and help them grow and scale.
Love it. Love it. So let's talk about promoting people into managers and let's talk about the things that go wrong, where things don't go right and how does that happen?
Oh, this is such a great topic because I have experienced it more times than I can count, where you're on a team full of people and then maybe the best systems engineer over a long enough time horizon ends up finding himself in the manager role or director role, leading all the other engineers. And the challenge here is just because you're a great engineer, it does not mean you are going to be good at leading a team of engineers. There are different skills that are required at each level whenever it comes to career progression or even building businesses. And so when you step into that role, where you step into the manager role or director role, it is crucial that you start to understand what it means to lead people. Start understanding how to motivate and inspire people. Start understanding how to effectively communicate and lead people in the way that they need to be led. Because it is no longer about you being the strongest individual contributor that can output the most designs or tools. It now becomes your role is a force multiplier. You have to help Jason and Sally and Mary figure out all of these different things so that they can level up. And the big miss that I see is people think that leadership skills are just this HR fluffy stuff out there that doesn't really mean anything. But in this day and age, these soft skills are really like superpowers, especially whenever you start ascending into leadership roles. And so the biggest miss is really stepping into that role and then not taking the time to invest in yourself and building those leadership skills.
Got it. Now, first of all, as entrepreneurs, is it the employee's responsibility to build their own leadership skills, or is it the person that put them there? Is it the entrepreneur, the company's role to develop those skills?
Oh man, that is a great question. And I would have to say it's probably a shared responsibility because if you, as the business owner or business leader, see a tremendous amount of potential in Jason, but maybe he doesn't quite have the necessary skills, it's probably a good idea to invest and pay $1,000 or a couple of $1,000 in sending him or her to leadership training. Because at the end of the day, that $1,000 you spend, the $1,500 or $2,000 that you spend, will be immaterial in the grand scheme of things because the output and their ability to increase the output of everybody else is going to just skyrocket. And so I think the employer has a responsibility to do it, but also a lot of times businesses, if they're running on razor thin margins, maybe they can't quite invest in developing those leadership skills or the skills necessary for them to be better at leading the team. There is unlimited amounts of information on the internet for free. So if your employer is not willing to invest, take the time to still invest in yourself. And I say time because you might not have the money on your own to pay for it, but go look at podcasts like this. Go look at all sorts of YouTube channels. There's tons of content out there. It will take longer if you don't invest in a coach or mentor, but you can absolutely do it on your own.
I love that. It's actually a shared responsibility. Now, as an employer standpoint, one of the things that I find is that, there's really no instruction manual of who is going to be a great lead or a great manager, right? It's, yes, you got someone that gives you a resume and they say they've done great things, right? But they're obviously looking for a job. Maybe they haven't. You've got somebody that is great on the technical side that's coming up that wants to be a manager. But how do you know who is going to really succeed in this role?
Okay, I want to break this out into current employer or employees and then people that you're looking at bringing into the organization because I think there's two different approaches. If somebody is already on your team, those people that have leadership skills are going to naturally emerge as a leader. Now, as the business owner, you need to be paying attention to who does everybody else go to when they need guidance? Who does everybody else go to when they need help and support? That is who you want to pay attention to. That is who you want to seriously consider for a few reasons, but one being the fact that if everybody's already going to that person and then you promote that person, nobody else on the team is going to be shocked. So you're immediately going to have buy-in with the rest of the people on the team. Maybe not everybody, but you will have a lot more buy-in. And then it just comes down to coaching them and building them so that they can be even stronger. Now, when you are looking external or outside of your organization and interviewing people, this gets a little bit more challenging because you're going to want to ensure that they know the technology, they know the systems, they know the processes, all of those hard skills that we were talking about a little bit ago. You need to make sure that they understand those, but also you have to look for certain clues in terms of their ability to effectively communicate, their ability to lead. And anybody can throw a manager title or I led this or I did this or I built this type of a thing. So you have to ask very targeted and specific questions around leadership. Talk me through an example of you disagreeing with somebody on your team. How did that unfold? How did you resolve that? Or talk me through an example of a few people on your team that were bickering and arguing back and forth. How did you resolve that issue? So when you start asking the right questions, it gives you more insight into how they think as a leader. And once you start paying closer attention to that, it makes it easier for you to bring them in and assimilate them into your culture, because hopefully they have similar morals and values and approaches to solving problems and communication to what you and the rest of the team do.
I love that. And that's a really great thought that you brought up. It's about observing if you're promoting within someone that is already respected on your team, right? Someone, like you said, that's the go-to person. And, because we've seen it where people have gotten promoted and everybody's like, why did you promote them? Or I don't want to work under that person. You've got mutiny suddenly going on the manager. And nobody wants to see that happen, but someone that is really well respected amongst their peers. And I think that's something that isn't talked about. I think, Sean, you just coined yourself a book there on finding the right manager, but that's a very key component, right? Is someone that's going to most likely be successful in your organization.
I would love to actually expand on that just briefly. If you are a business owner or business leader and you are bringing somebody in from the outside, it can be a little bit tricky to do this, but I would highly encourage you to take the time and let other members of the team, maybe even the people that will ultimately be reporting to this person, interview them as well. I've had a few situations where I had the opportunity to interview my new boss that was coming in, and all of my peers got to interview my new boss that was going to be coming in before we officially extended an offer. Every single one of us said, nope, this is not the guy. He's not capable, competent, qualified. He's not the guy. He got put in anyways as our boss. And within 7 months, he was no longer with the company because he was not competent, capable, or qualified. It doesn't matter how much you like this person or if they're a friend of your board member or whatever. As the business leader, you have to listen to the people on your team. They're the ones that are getting things done every day. They're the ones that are really moving your business forward. And if they say this is not the guy, it doesn't matter how much you like that person or how closely related they are to you. You have to find somebody else. And that is a big miss that I think some people struggle with. They're like, oh, I really like this person. I trust them a lot. They'll do great. But if everybody on the team disagrees, it's not going to work. You're just going to be fighting an uphill battle.
Oh yeah, and unfortunately, it can, when you're getting rid of that person, can feel like seeping poison out of your bloodstream, right? So much damage can be done to when you have the wrong leader. So let's talk about the next question that would entail. I think sometimes as leaders, we've made a mistake already. We may have somebody in our organization that may have been with us for a long time. And over time, we've promoted them just because they've been with us for a long time. And they're not really thriving in that role. Maybe they're an introvert that doesn't like to deal with people. But now they've got this fancy title and they're not pushing the organization forward. What do you say needs to happen in those situations? How do you work with that to either increase their productivity or part ways?
Oh, yeah. There's going to be so many nuances here, but what I can share is usually you will see, as the senior leader, you will see if somebody is struggling in that role very early on. There are going to be indications. Whether you pay attention to them or not, that is a different story, but there will be indicators of will they be successful in this role long term. Now, I see this a lot with entrepreneurs that are building their businesses. They bring in a friend that they went to high school with because they trust them. Just because you trust someone, that does not mean that they are going to thrive in a specific role. Sometimes you have somebody who's a great engineer, loyal as they come, and you think, hey, I'm going to have you lead all of the engineers. And then they get into the role, and then all of the other engineers get upset and mad and don't want to work for this person. It's not a good situation. So my guidance would be, as soon as you start to see those little indicators and those little clues, start investing in coaching and developing them. Now, if you, as the business owner, don't have the time or capacity, bring somebody in, invest that time and energy into them. If you do have the capacity, take the time to work with them. That can be a little bit tricky if there is a long-standing relationship and friendship there, because sometimes people are not always comfortable giving harsh feedback to a longtime friend. So it is valuable to bring somebody in from the outside. Now, another thing is don't let it go on for too long. If you keep this person in the role and you coach them and you coach them and you have an external coach come in for a year straight and you're coaching them for a year straight and they're in this role for 2 years and people are falling off the team like flies because they don't want to work for this person, they are destroying your company. They're destroying your team. You cannot allow this person that you've had a long-standing relationship with to just destroy your team. Usually when people find themselves in that role, because there is trust with the business owner, they will spin a narrative. Oh, that person was toxic. They needed to go anyways. Oh, that person was incompetent. They needed to go anyways. Oh, I didn't like that person. They needed to go anyways. But look, over time, if you have a team of 10 people and within a year, 9 of them have quit, they're not quitting the company. They're quitting the boss. So as the business owner, you have to make the tough decision. Do I get rid of this person completely, or do I put them back into an engineering role? Both conversations are uncomfortable conversations to have, but you have to think about what's best for the business and the team. At the end of the day, we build businesses for profit, and all of this churn that's occurring is eating away at your margin. Now, how long you can sustain it, that's entirely up to you, but you're going to have to make a tough decision at some point. The question is, how much pain do you in the business have to experience before you actually make the tough call?
Right. And making no decision is a decision, right? So,
Yep.
it's so, you definitely want to make a decision. So, and be control of that. That's interesting too, that the thought of demoting someone, right? Um, you know, I, I can imagine that's probably never a comfortable situation, right? Someone that's used to leading is suddenly put back into the ranks and maybe that means less pay. What does that look like normally? And how does that work out when you demote? So do you even recommend that, Sean?
I don't recommend it very often. There are not many instances where I have seen this work out well. It can be done, and this might sound a little bit odd, but you have to get that person to recognize they're not a good fit for a leadership role and get them to think, well, maybe I should go back to being an engineer. And there's a lot of layers to kind of peel back on this topic, because if they got a $30,000 a year raise going into a leadership role and now you've got to demote them, maybe you can't take all 30,000 because they bought a new house or a boat or whatever. But if you can start having conversations, hey, Jason, how do you think things are going? Well, my team keeps quitting. Well, okay. Do you think maybe there's anything you can do differently or better? Do you actually enjoy leading people, or would you rather just go back to engineering and designing tools? Man, I really like designing tools. I'm kind of struggling with this leading people concept. Well, would you have any interest in going back to that? So it doesn't always work, but if you can figure out a way to ask the right questions to that leader, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that will guide them back to the idea of wanting to just be an engineer and not deal with the stressors and pressure associated with leading people, that is probably going to be your best approach. Now, that does take time to get them there. If time is not a luxury that you have, maybe sending them on their way is a better option. And if you do have to send somebody on their way, if you know of another business owner or another company that is needing a good engineer and you can make a referral for them, that always goes a long way. The reality is you're probably going to lose that friendship once you have to terminate somebody, which is very unfortunate. Actually, at one point, had to let go of one of my friends. We met in fourth grade. We were roommates in college. He worked for me at 4 different companies and friends for a few decades, and unfortunately ran into some issue for a year straight and had to write him up multiple times. Ended up having to let him go, and it broke my heart. He hasn't spoken to me since, but that's just the price we pay whenever we start bringing people into our organizations and start working with them more and more. There's always going to be some sort of a risk there.
Maybe we shouldn't hire our friends, right? Keep friends
No, I
friends.
mean, it is challenging. I mean, it can work, but as businesses grow and scale, they become increasingly complex, and not everybody's up to operating at scale. And I mean, it can definitely be challenging.
I can imagine. I can definitely imagine that. Now, I'm curious too with that is you one thing that you pointed out was that a leader is not succeeding when you see mutiny. Meaning that the team is just not happy with them. You're starting to see a lot of attrition and that type of thing. And sometimes you do have a very talented leader, right? You have a leader that brings a specific skill. They're actually toughening the standards in some case that may not be there. And we've seen that a lot with people that are implementing profit first is, the team that took you to seven figures is not the one that's going to take you to eight. And it's because it requires a different level of thinking, sometimes a different level of dedication. And sometimes it's the leader, but it's also the team. And in the case where you've got a good leader for a good set of time, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not a good leader, right? Because you talked about the concept of a force multiplier, meaning someone that's able to multiply people's contributions. What do you do in that situation? What are your thoughts of that? I'm curious, where you do have a talented leader that is doing the right thing in terms of implementing a stricter standard, but the team is like, it's not reasonable, the expectations aren't right. What do you do in that type of case?
Man, you're just full of great questions. Okay. All right. So let's think we have a leader and they have a team of 10 people. One thing that is, we'll say, relatively constant in my experience is you can almost bucketize the performance of your team. You're going to have your top performing third, you're going to have your middle performing third, and you're going to have your bottom performing third. These top performers are naturally they're going to be intrinsically driven. They're going to be motivated. They're going to be getting things done with very little motivation or guidance. They just go execute. Your middle third, they're probably going to need a little bit more hand holding, a little bit more guidance and things to work through. Your bottom performers, those are going to be the people that you're probably going to want to, as the business scales, figure out a way how to kind of just, oh man, that's going to sound bad, but work them out of the organization because they're going to be resistant to change. They're not going to like new processes or procedure. They're always going to have a negative attitude or demeanor or things like that. So if you have a strong leader that is achieving results, work with that leader and figure out who are the people in each of these tiers, and then as the business owner, have conversations with those people, your top 66% or so, understand where their heads are at, validate and verify that they respect and admire and are going to work for this leader and that they are aligned with the mission and goals and objectives of the organization. Because as you just pointed out, it is very different to get to seven figures than it is to eight and nine and beyond. Some people are going to adapt and grow. And a big myth that I see is as organizations are growing and as the people on the team are growing, as long as they're aligned and they're growing at the right rate, everything's great. It's amazing. Inevitably, at some point, the organization is going to start going this way. And if certain people on the team can't quite follow along, you're going to struggle with it. And the manager that we're talking about should be able to identify those people and put a plan in place. Do we need to replace this person? Can they be built and developed? If not, that's unfortunate, but the business has to go on, right? And the inverse can also be true. I've seen instances where the employees grow faster than the organization, and they just crave more and more, and they're capable of doing so much more, but the organization can't sustain it. So the organization can grow, the employees can grow. And the biggest issue is when one starts going this way, but they don't want to let go of the other, it creates a lot of tension and friction and challenges. As we move through the seasons of our life, as our businesses grow and scale, we have to get comfortable with the idea of letting go. Not everybody is going to be with us for the entire ride. As much as we would love to be able to see all of these people thrive as our business grows, that's just not the reality of the world. And the manager and the business owner, they need to be cognizant of this. They need to be aware of this and make your best effort to build them and develop them. But if they're not going to get there, don't let them be a drag on the organization. Because as you start jetting off this direction, you're going to have to pull and pry and try to get them to come along with you. And you're wasting a tremendous amount of energy as the manager, as the business owner, trying to pull these people along instead of just leaning into the top 2/3, bringing them along, and then replacing the bottom third. And I know that sounds harsh or brash, but at the end of the day, yes, it is business, and we're trying to grow and help everybody be successful.
Oh yeah, and I find usually if it's a lot of change and for the better, it's probably your bottom that's complaining. Do you find that, Sean, or do you?
Oh, for sure. The bottom third, usually they're resistant to change. They always have a pessimistic outlook and negative outlook. They're always complaining and moaning. And the problem is they become this black hole of toxicity and almost like a cancer. Cancer spreads. And so a lot of times business owners, they struggle with having difficult conversations and letting go of those cancerous individuals or those toxic individuals. And I mean, sometimes the most toxic person is your best salesman. And so you have to make that very difficult choice of, do I sacrifice this $1 million in revenue salesperson to get this toxic person out of the organization? And every single time I have seen this happen, where they finally get fed up with that toxic individual, even if they're a top performer, you get that toxicity out of your organization and everybody else's productivity skyrockets and they more than make up for whatever that person was contributing because they're actually working towards the mission instead of complaining about the toxic performer. And I know the example that I just cited was really about a top performer, but the same can be said for anybody. Wherever they're at in terms of performance on the team, if they're toxic, if they have that negative, pessimistic outlook, just get them out.
And I think that's something, Sean, that's not talked about a lot is, we talk about toxic leaders, right?
Mhm.
But there's toxic team members, right? And you guys know I talk a lot about the Bible about different things, but a little yeast rises through the dough pretty quickly. And it's not just your leaders that can be toxic. It can be that person that answers the phone for gruff every day. That person probably should not be answering the phone for your new clients if they've got attitude. And it's about addressing that and not being afraid to have those critical conversations where you say, your attitude is repulsing the organization, right? And hurting the organization and being clear on that. So
Yeah.
very good thought on that. I think we're talking about some things that need to be talked about more that aren't addressed. So thank you, Sean, for that.
Of course.
So, Sean, one of the things that we love to ask our guests, and you've given us so many juicy morsels today. And as we close out, one of the things that we love to ask is if you could leave us with one piece of advice, it can be personal, it can be business advice. What would that advice be?
Life is extremely challenging for all of us. We see social media and content, and that's people's highlight reels. Every single person on this planet struggles with something in life. And the most important thing that I have learned over the years is to seek out and find and focus on the silver lining. It doesn't matter how challenging things get for you in life. These challenges, this adversity that you and your team and your business are going through are a good thing because it is forcing you to learn new skills, to understand how to better navigate through these challenges in life and business. Everything comes down to the lens in which we view things through. Always seek the silver lining. It doesn't matter how dark it gets. Ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me? Once you can reflect on that and know what you've got to do, then just execute. Keep moving forward.
I love that. Look for the silver lining, look for the lesson and the hard space. So thank you, Sean. Very good advice for life as well as business, right? Because we're going to always go through some challenges. That's part of life. And Sean, what's the best way for our audience to reach out, to learn more, and to connect with you?
Yeah, you can go to SeanBarnes.com. You can find me just Sean Barnes on LinkedIn. That's probably the most active social media platform that I'm on. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok and all the others at _Sean Barnes, but usually just LinkedIn or even WSSsolutions.com. Any of those platforms work fantastic. Just reach out to me and connect there.
Well, thank you, Sean, today for your wealth of wisdom that you share with our audience.
Appreciate it. Thank you.